You're listening to the NASM-CPT Podcast with Richey, winner of the Share Care Emmy Award for Social Storytelling and the official podcast of the National Academy of Sports Medicine.
Hey, y'all, and welcome to the NASM-CPT Podcast. My name is Richey, and today we're going to talk about dynamic stretching. We've been talking about stretching over the course of the last few weeks, but this one is a little more interesting. It's a little more, dynamic, because according to the OPT model, this dynamic stretching is really reserved for the power phase. It's reserved for the performance phase, the athletic phase. These are athletes when they are going to get ready to train out and do their sport-specific stuff. We do more dynamic stretching. Not as much focusing on static stretching, not as much focusing on the active flexibility that we've talked about in past weeks. And you've seen these stretches. You've seen the dynamic stretches that go on like leg swings. So leg swings or the Frankenstein walks. I like these where you put your arms out in front of you and then you just kick towards the opposite arm and then you groan. No, you don't. I mean, you can, but that's a choice. It's a choice. So for the Frankenstein walks, a great dynamic stretch, the world's greatest stretch. If you've ever seen people do the world's greatest stretch, or you see them do this stretch and you say, "What's that?" And they say the world's greatest stretch. And you're like, "That's all right." But that is a dynamic stretch. Walking lunges, high knees, butt kicks, ice skaters, karaoke, not singing, but the multiplanar movement where your legs and your arms and your body are going through a lot of different movements. But why? Why are these more dynamic stretches? Why are they better for the body when it comes to dynamic activity? Well, I think it goes together with the word dynamic. When you're more dynamic in your activity, you want to increase your dynamics with your warm-up. And I think it's interesting, right? So can I still do static stretching? You can. In fact, there was a great study that was done by, Zakira, Kingingham, and Sin et al. 2015, the effects of static and dynamic stretching on injury prevention in high school soccer athletes. And what they did, there were 12 high schools, and each of those had two teams, a varsity and a junior varsity team. And they took all of these athletes and they split them up and they said, you do only dynamic stretching and you do dynamic stretching and static stretching. And at the end of it, I realized there was really no statistically significant difference in the injuries between the two groups. And injury prevention is really hard to measure. But based on what they were doing, there was no difference between the two groups and the dynamic stretching and the dynamics and static stretching group. But that kind of feeds another piece of information, which basically they said the static stretching group and doing static stretching doesn't provide an added benefit to dynamic stretching and the prevention of injury in this population, which were the varsity and junior varsity soccer athletes. All right, well, we do know that dynamic stretching is highly recommended, and there's some research that's been thrown out there. People like Belm et al. 2016, Pierre et al. 2011 talk about dynamic stretching as one of the components of a warm-up exercise before performing dynamic athletic activities. And that's because dynamic stretching has been shown to improve range of motion, muscle power, vertical jump, sprint speed, according to Mizuno 2017 and Pierre et al. 2011. It's good for you. It works. It helps to warm you up. It maintains some tendinous tension, loosens up the muscles. It helps to increase the range of motion. And so the idea of doing dynamic stretching, and it also helps to get the heart rate up. But I like this concept. If you think about the idea of a warm up, I don't know if I actually buy into the actual warm up as in getting warm, as in a temperature thing. Because if you think about it, I used to tell people in inappropriate analogy to be used here, but I would say things like, think about cookie dough. And if you put cookie dough in the freezer and it's really cold and it's rock hard, put it in the fridge, it's hard, but you take it out, you warm it up, it's very squishy, and you can use that for butter or whatever you want to talk about. But the truth of the matter is, in our resting state, our muscles are about 98.6 degrees. That's not a refrigerator. That's not a freezer. That's really, really warm. So are our muscles warm? Yeah. Well, then we do a warm up to get them warmer. Maybe a little bit. However, your body doesn't like getting that much warmer. So what does it do? It purposefully sweats in order to cool you off so your temperature doesn't get really that much higher than 98.6 degrees. So are we really getting warm? No, not really. I mean, maybe a little bit, yeah, but not really. So when we talk about warm up, I'm not just talking about temperature of your tissue. No. No, I'm talking about blood flow, which is good, which causes the vessels to expand, makes it warmer, maybe a little bit, but it increases. I think really more focused on a neuromuscular warm up. The acknowledgement that if we're doing dynamic leg swings and we're kicking our legs frontward in front of us, we're kicking them back behind us. If we're doing some dynamic stretches for the calves, whether that's a walking lunge and really think about knee over toe to get a good stretch in the calf and the back leg. You can even keep the knee relatively straight and get more of a gastroc stretch. And you can do these. And that neuromuscular warm up is basically saying, hey, we're slowly building into this. So all of those safety mechanisms that your nervous system says contract really tight to protect you from this swinging leg. This casual swinging leg, as it swings, it increases its swing. We are now teaching our brain, letting our brain know and understand that this is where we want it to go. And this is not a dangerous position to be in. So that when we could do our sprinting, our all-out run, maybe our nervous system is going to be far less likely to overcontract in that fully extended leg position where a hamstring strain is most likely to occur. Yeah, we can get warmer, but it's really about preparation for movement. And that's why these activities are so important. But if you look at the NASM-OPT model, you'll also see foam rolling in not just the corrective exercise phase where you see static stretching, and it's not just in the active phase where you see active stretching, and it's not just in the functional flexibility phase where you see dynamic stretching. It is in all of them. And why? Well, one of the interesting things, and this isn't like to do an upsell on foam rolling, it's just understanding why foam rolling is a part of the functional flexibility, or it can be done with, or even sometimes as functional flexibility in lieu of a dynamic warm up. So there's an interesting study by Su et al. 2017. The effects of foam rolling, static stretching, and dynamic stretching warm-ups on muscular flexibility and strength in young adults. And this was in the Journal of Sports Rehabilitation. Now, the idea behind this is that foam rolling can improve muscle function, performance, and joint range of motion, but will it do a better job than static stretching or than dynamic stretching? And so this was a crossover study where they did these different things. And it was done at the university lab, 15 male, 15 female college students. And here's what they found. They found that the flexibility test scores improved significantly more after foam rolling as compared with static and dynamic stretching. With regard to muscle strength, only knee extension peak torque, pre versus post intervention, improved significantly after the dynamic stretching and foam rolling, but not static stretching. So the knee flexion peak torque remained unchanged. The takeaway was that foam rolling is more effective than static stretching and dynamic stretching in acutely increasing flexibility in the quadriceps and hamstrings without hampering muscle strength. and therefore it may be recommended as part of a warm-up in healthy young adults. Man, that's crazy. Why? Because dynamic stretching seems to go a lot better with dynamic stretching. So why would we foam roll? Well, foam roll seems to be doing really well, and it seems to have the same effect. It can loosen the muscles up. It can warm the muscles up. Those were my quotation marks. But there is a slight temperature change. But is that really doing the work? But there is a neurological change that takes place. And that's the important one. That's the takeaway. And I still feel that very strongly that dynamic stretching should precede dynamic activities. All right. I think you probably think so too. I hope this message was allowed you to be like, yeah, yeah. Now, what does that mean if somebody has gotten to the athletic phase, but they still have overactive muscles? They're short, tight, and overactive. You can still foam roll but I'd say don't static stretch before. Do your static stretching separately. Do it after. Do it on another day to focus on increasing your range of motion as a corrective strategy. But pre-workout, still do the foam rolling. That still works just fine, clearly based on this research study, but also the dynamic stretching to be added in to prepare you better for the movement at hand. Thank you so much for listening. If you got questions for me, you can hit me up at dr.rickricchey on Instagram or email me, rick.richey@nasm.org. Keep inspiring people to fitness. Keep doing what you do. We appreciate it. Like, subscribe, share with your fitness friends and family. Thanks for listening. This has been the NASM-CPT Podcast.